Hello everyone, this is Nolan with the 307 RPG podcast, and I just want to say thanks to all of our awesome patrons. If you like our show and want to support us, you can find us at patreon.com/The Forge Herald. Thanks everyone, hope you enjoy the show.
Hello everybody and welcome to the 307 RPG podcast. My name is Patrick and I am your host, and I am joined as always by my co-host.
I'm Nolan.
Nolan, what is going on? Anything exciting?
Finally getting back to playing some games after a little break and
took a week
looking
off
forward to it. So,
yeah, we just wrapped up our D&D session. We'll have a new episode of that live on Wednesday. Some interesting stuff going on there. It's a homebrew campaign, so nobody can sneak a look at the book and see what's going on. So it's been very interesting.
I don't write anything until after we play.
Yeah.
I have like 5 bullet points of what I'd like you guys to see someday. But for the most part, it's been kind of a fun thing of like, ooh, I didn't even think of this, and now I get to add it. And so you guys have really helped to write what's going to happen with the story.
Oh, good.
Or when you guys just totally avoid what I had written, it doesn't work out. So,
and of course, we didn't play Scarred Lands or Vampire this past week. Like we said, we took a week off. We will be doing new Scarred Lands stuff this coming week, as well as resuming the Giovanni Chronicles. We're going to be taking a look at, we'll be playing the Dagger of Spirit Ghosts, which is the second in the Spirit Ghost line of adventures. And we will be picking up with the third book in the Giovanni Chronicles, which is where we're going to stop. There's been a lot of talk about the fourth book in the Giovanni Chronicles, and a lot of people didn't like it because you no longer play your characters. You're now playing, if I remember correctly, gargoyles who have to defend against the children of Isaac.
At this point, you are so far in power that there's no real point there's nothing pushing that challenging level that makes sense, I guess, at that point.
Sure.
So they dropped
Unless you're going to go after the Niktuku. Haha, foreshadowing.
Good luck.
Yeah, good luck, exactly. Okay, so on this week, we are, of course, going to look at some news. We do have some interesting stuff coming out of Modifius in relation to Vampire the Masquerade. We have some suggestions for both Dungeons & Dragons and Onyx Path, so you can learn some stuff there. And then we're going to dive into our topic of the night, which is, of course, as I foreshadowed with mentioning the Niktuku, Clan Nosferatu. So, anything else before we jump into the news?
Nope.
All right. So, not a lot still coming out of Wizards of the Coast. I did take a moment, and you and I kind of talked about Dragon Magazine last week. I know you looked through it.
I got the app on my phone, looked at some of the articles. Not kind of the same thing. Nothing really breaking or whatever, and maybe that is just I'm in between an issue for month to month or whatever, but they do have a Twitter page, and so you gotta get a few updates, but nothing groundbreaking news-wise.
No, a lot of times I see what they do is they might expand a little bit on some UA stuff or just talk about why certain things happen in newer books and things like that. And the podcast, Dragon Talk, is much the same. And I'm going to put a link to the show or to Dragon Talk in the show notes so people can check it out. There wasn't a whole lot of news that came out of this week's episode. It was a lot of, behind the scenes stuff, as well as some Lori Should Know with Chris Perkins, things like that. It's a good podcast. It's worth listening to. And I do think they will give us some news through that podcast, but it just didn't happen to be this week. So, and then speaking of podcast, Onyx Path also has a podcast. It's Onyx Pathcast. This week the topic was erratas, and they talked about how erratas used to be handled with White Wolf and how they're handled now, which is kind of interesting, I guess. And I never knew this. Matthew Dawkins, who's one of the hosts on there, mentioned that there was an errata to the Giovanni Chronicles, the first book. Apparently, one of the founders' stat block was left out.
Okay.
I for some reason I never caught that.
It might not have been one of the ones that we played. So,
well, and if you think about like when that book came out in the 90s, I would have never thought to go, hunting for an errata.
Right.
So it was, again, it's a interesting thing worth listening to. We do have some new stuff coming out of Onyx Path. Night of Horrors, Shunned by the Moon. It's a new book coming out for Werewolf. I'm sorry, it's a new book that is out for Werewolf the Forsaken 2nd edition. I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at this.
I seen the cover popping around, and that is some frightening art.
It really is.
Some weird pincher-looking sons of guns coming out of the werewolf. So
So this is a bestiary of sorts. It gives you all sorts of new little monsters and stuff that you can include in your Werewolf for the Forsaken games. Werewolf for the Forsaken is in Chronicles of Darkness. And this book is available in PDF form on Drive-Thru RPG. The big news for the week, for the games that we play anyway, is out of Modifius. What did we learn there, Nolan?
Well, some of you know, White Wolf has partnered with Modifius to produce Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. What makes that so cool is basically we get two solid companies pulling their collective efforts to create something really amazing, and just more resources to try and do that. So announcing this week, they are working on a organized play effort.
Yeah, which I thought that was kind of interesting. So we do have like Adventure League, which is organized play for Dungeons and Dragons. So I guess the way we'd have to quantify this, if you will, is to think about it as Adventure League. So we have, they're going to be releasing chronicles. They're not campaigns. They're going to release chronicles that you can play in your store or at an event or even in your group, which you can do that with Adventure League adventures. If you are part of this group, part of their organized play, you will even get advanced access to upcoming chronicles before they release.
I think that'll be interesting to see too, just for, again, it's always interesting to see what, air quotes, the pros think is a good adventure. And,
right.
And so a lot of times we've seen not always the best or consistent content come out of Wizards for D&D stuff, where we've had a lot of fun with their Adventure League content. And then just some of the stuff the community comes up with is just so much better.
So, we've played several community release stuff, and we've really enjoyed those. If you're interested in becoming part of the organized play, there is a link in the show notes that you can click on and go check that out. Under development right now, we thought we were going to have this summer, is The Fall of London. I think we were calling it London's Burning, which is like the first sentence in the description. It is under development right now. According to the press release that we got from Modifius, this will be the first official chronicle for V5.
Okay.
Which is great. These source books, these chronicle books that they used, to these by night books, if you will, that they put out for second edition were fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to this one. I know Chicago by Night was a Kickstarter that we did, and that comes out in November. So this will be kind of neat to get our hands on this. It looks like the Second Inquisition is in full effect and is decimating the kindred population of London. The players wake up from torpor. All this stuff is going on around them, and they need to get out, but apparently there's something they have to do first.
Okay.
So that'll be interesting. I do think interesting here that we're talking about this is the Second Inquisition, because, as we'll find out later, it's kind of the Nosferatu's fault that the Second Inquisition rose up.
Yeah.
What's coming out after London, Nolan?
Let's see here. It looks like... Well, you skipped over La Sombra.
What? I didn't skip over La Sombra.
So that was going to be part of what Fall of London originally was, that they were promising La Sombra would be in there. So
gotcha.
They talked about the V5 player guide.
Yes.
So this will give us a look at the 13 major clans and finally start to get adding more to it. I don't know. I'll be curious to see what's going on, because there is a lot of stuff that has happened with clans leaving and walking away, and seeing how
discipline's changing.
Seeing how the organization happens, and see if that's either a balancing thing or if there's lore behind it, or so.
Right. This is supposed to give us access to the 13 major clans. It's supposed to talk, expand on disciplines, things like that. So I think this is going to be a good book, and that's supposed to come on the heels of Fall of London. Okay. So we should be getting that pretty quick. We also have a V5 Quick Start set coming out. Now, those of you who have messed with the Quick Start sets before, was it the Mines of Fandalvar? Wasn't that in the starter set for Dungeons and Dragons? There's also the Stranger Things starter set that came out. And so what these tend to have is some pre-generated characters, an abridged rule book, something quick and simple to teach you the rules really fast, and dice. And the story. It's like, okay, here's this adventure ready to be played. Grab your group, sit down and play it. This is a great introduction to the book, or to the game. The nice thing about these is these tend to be about $25. So you can buy this, play the game, see if you like it without investing that $50 to $100 for a couple more books.
Well, I think it's a good way to introduce people, because it can be a lot to try and create a character. And here's a role, here's what you are, get familiar with it, let's check it out, see if you like it, and if you want to build your own, then we can go from there. So
and I would imagine most people who find out they enjoy it are going to be saying, okay, you know what, I want to create my own character now. So that is coming out in the fall, it sounds like, which will be a great way to introduce people to the game, especially if you or live in an area like we do where you don't have people, a whole lot of people who play the game.
Right.
This is a great way to introduce people to the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of news.
It's been a while since we've had stuff get announced. So
that's probably the most news we've had in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that does bring us to the topic of the night. We are going to be discussing Clan Nosferatu, but we're going to take a quick break because both of our mics are on Omni.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry about that, folks. We had to take a quick break. Nolan and I noticed that our mics were not set correctly, so we had to do some quick readjusting. So if the first part of this podcast sounded a little bit odd, we do apologize. Hopefully this will clear it up and make it sound a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we are going to talk about our topic of the night, Clan Nosferatu. This is the clan. So if you've ever watched the movie Nosferatu, they really modeled this character after Count Orlok is his name. The reason that, well, we'll get into this. Nosferatu are the hideous ones, the ones who live in shadow, the ones who tend to live in sewers. They are horribly deformed at the embrace and are really quite interesting. I learned more about this, and it's funny because I've read about Nosferatu before. I've owned the clan book. I've read the clan book. I think I learned more now than I did 20 years ago when I first read the clan book.
I don't know. I think it's interesting when they all find different ways to survive in different clans and what their reasons are and where their weakness causes issues for them. I think the Nosferatu are probably the clan that embraced it the most, as far as like, there is no games. The monster is on the outside, so we deal with it and we move on. They're not trying to hide anything. They're not trying to control anything. They realize what they are, and they make it themselves useful.
Sure.
The V5 book talks to them, like basically said, when everything is all said and done, it's going to be us and cockroaches. We're survivors.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the underlying mindset of they make themselves useful.
Years ago, there was a TV show, Kindred the Embrace. It was on Fox. I remember, and I can't remember the guy's name now, but the Nosferatu character in that show was terrifying. And there was one scene I always remember there. If I remember correctly, the prince had passed judgment on this other Canaanite, and like all around, all of a sudden, they just like this whole army of Nosferatu just unobfuscated and just swarmed on this on this kindred. I remember thinking then, because that came out in like 95, 96, somewhere around there. I remember thinking then, wow, those guys are scary. And it was a Nosferatu, and I used to play live action that killed my Ravnos, fucker. So let's talk a little bit about the history. So Absimilard. Now, we're not sure if we're saying this name correctly because I don't think I've ever seen a name spelled like this. Absimilard. So I'm saying Absimilard. Does that sound good to you? Okay. This is the antediluvian of the Nosferatu clan. Now, it is believed that he was embraced by Zyla.
That's also how it works?
I think that's who it was.
Mm-hmm. It is, presumably.
Who would have been of the second generation. And she embraced Absimilard because he was very beautiful, very powerful, vain hunter. And she hunted him. And in the process of doing so, again, this is a very vain person, she gave him a tiny scar on his face.
He was what they believe was the son of King David. And so he was privileged and a hunter and, again, extremely vain because of his station.
And so with her scarring him, he became very vengeful. And he went after her. And this could be one of the first documented. I think last week we talked about how Malkov killed his sire, and we thought maybe that was the first one. This may be the very first time where we see a third generation kill one of the second generations. And it was completely out of revenge.
Yeah, and equally violently punished for it.
Yeah. So Absimilard went on to form a small clique of children called this is during the time of the Second City, we call these now the Niktuku. These are the boogeymen of the Nosferatu. These are the scary ones. So you're looking at, these are all fourth generation vampires, fourth generation Nosferatu who are children of Absimilard. one of them went away. They only know her as the matriarch. And this is, keep in mind, this is before the Nosferatu were horribly disfigured, hideous individuals. And they're still very beautiful, vain creatures that are much like Ebsimilard, which is why he embraced them. When Cain came back, however, he's like, no, you screwed up. You killed one of mine, and you are forever cursed. And he cursed the entire clan, which he's done with all the clans. But he made them all ugly. Every one of them are just horribly changed. In fact, if you want to see a great modern day visualization of a Nosferatu, you should follow, her name is Nosferabu on Twitter and Instagram. She cosplays as a Nosferatu and does a fantastic job. You should check her out. You see what I mean by hideously ugly. Anyway, so the matriarch went away. She left the group. This is before they got changed, and she was one that she did get changed. She did become cursed because it was the entire clan. But something happened there. We had this matriarch, almost like the schism that we had with the Bruja. The matriarch went away, started her own group of Nosferatu. Ebsimilard and the Niktuku kind of did their own thing. And you had this weird, I don't know, I hate using the word schism because I always seem to use the word schism, but this weird divergence in the clan. And as a result, now the Niktuku, like I said, are these boogie monsters. They come back and hunt them down. In fact, the great Nosferatu Baba Yaga, who was a fourth generation, was supposedly killed by the Niktuku.
Yeah, it seems like Ebsimilard has basically gone after all of his kids to try and present it to Cain for forgiveness by wiping out his clan so that he will no longer be hideous. Yeah. Basically begging for forgiveness. And so, they talk about just before falling to torpor, Ebsimilard was fighting Baba Yaga in Russia. He spent a long time in torpor. He basically just pops up and then has his clan hunt down his clan.
Yeah. And when it comes to Nosferatu, in fact, there's a chapter in Beckett's Jihad Diary where he believes he's encountered one of the Niktuku, and he is terrified. He pisses himself. When it comes to them, all of them fear the Niktuku.
Yep.
None of them are like, oh yeah, whatever. They're just
extremely loyal, bloodbound agents of
Ebsimilard.
Yep.
In the beginning, the Nosferatu hunted humans, whereas many vampires tried to coexist with them. The Nosferatu hunted them. They knew that they couldn't coexist. Yep. They made their home, and I think this is fascinating, in the beds of rivers, of the great rivers like the Tigris, the Nile, and then they would come out at night and hunt the farmers. In Rome, they lived in the catacombs. So you have these monsters that just seem to rise up from the dead or from the rivers and attack things.
They definitely embraced, again, being the monster. I mean...
I thought it's interesting as we move to Dark Ages, they're now considered one of the low clans. They're not considered as high and mighty as the Ventrue or the Toreador, whom they hate the Toreador. But they embrace Christianity. I wish I knew more as why. I mean, there's a clan book Nosferatu for Dark Ages, and I have not read that one. But they embrace Christianity. In particular, they embrace flatulation, which is, of course, whipping yourself. They also discover, and I think this is really interesting, the connection between human waste and plagues. So if a Ventrue or a Toreador got too powerful, they just go in and plague the entire village or the town and wipe them out.
Poison the water supply, poison the blood supply.
Yep. And then they could hide so well within humanity or within humankind by, especially with the prevalence of things like leprosy.
They talk a lot about it in 5th edition. They did a really good job of basically it's like a CIA manifest, and it's talking about we leave these alone. They don't seem to be very powerful. They hide underground, but because they take care of the people that nobody wants, they talk about how basically as they've tried to storm sewers and stuff like that, they end up killing a lot of humans, not knowing. And so for the most part now, they don't even deal with it. They basically assume that because of what happened with the website and stuff like that, that part is done and we're just going to focus on bigger fish. And so I think that's a cool thing that again, they they embrace that they're monsters. They take in the other monsters, and they make them. I mean, they're loyal. They take care of them.
they're
Make sure
very loyal.
they're fed and clothed. And then rarely does a Nosferatu show up in person to give you a message. It has humans that do it for them. And so you know that you're being watched. You never get the message. You never get the drop on them. I mean,
They're really quite
frightening.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Well, they're frightening and fascinating.
and it's not that the physical, like they're hideous, but that's not the scary part
No,
about
that's
them.
not the scary. It's because they're hideous and what they've discovered they can do because of that, that I think is fascinating and frightening. Victorian age, you saw a lot of like underground stuff being built with canals and things like that, aqueducts, and so you see a lot more of the Nosferatu going underground. And embracing the fact that they live underground, or they hang out in the slums again, like the Thieves' Citadel, which is areas of high crime in London. They tend to be those areas tend to be self-contained culturally and architecturally. The Nosferatu control those areas, and if new construction happens, they make sure it's going to be something that benefits them. Now, we've mentioned the Second Inquisition. And so with the advent of the internet, leave it to the Nosferatu to figure out a way to create another network that kind of hides underneath the internet that they call ShrekNet. Now, again, I'm calling out some folks. There is, and I'm drawing a blank, and I'll make sure to, why can't I remember? There is a person on Twitter, and I am so sorry I can't remember your name, who has created a ShrekNet of sorts, a website where he's linking all the different like actual plays and stuff like that people are doing, so people can find Vampire the Masquerade content. And I will make sure I correct his name and get his name correct in here. I apologize. But anyway, they created this parallel network called ShrekNet. But something happened in 2004.
Yeah, it seemed like they got hacked
by the NSA.
Yep, and it very much was. Again, the Nosferatu have made their living by being secret keepers and controlling information, and now all their documents and all of their basically every aspect of the Masquerade is basically broken at this point.
Well, and you said all their documents. I mean, imagine like if somebody took and basically docked everybody in the world. Or all high-ranking members of something. Basically, that's what happened. I mean, the NSA found out, oh, look, we have all these files on vampires.
They know they're out there. They know where to hunt. They talk about how, part of the Nosferatu is sending people as messengers and stuff like that because it's more difficult to travel at night now. Like, they don't own the night anymore because of this situation. Reading the clan book, it was... They're like, by the time that happened, they're like, we were already gone. I mean, we knew we were hacked and we were gone. Like when it's all said and done, we will survive. We are, and that's their thing is like, yeah, they got hacked. Yeah, they messed up. And so if you're playing one in 5th edition, their role is they're kind of looked down upon because of this situation. People expect them to be kind of weak, and they're already on to the next phase. The Toreador almost just like, well, thank God, they're finally out of our hair. And they're still there. They're still a part of the network, especially as they talk in the 5th edition V5 timeline. A lot of the muscle of the Camarilla has abandoned them. And so they were talking about ways to play one as being, you could be an enforcer. I mean, that is a thing. So it's evolved from just being a spy master and a collector of secrets. It's a survival. You can be a thug. They've got a lot of different ways of playing one now, and it is all dealing with, again, a lot of weird things have happened in V5 with the clans and the changes, and so.
Yes, absolutely. Batsiel Muto, that's who's created the ShrekNet in real life, the website for ShrekNet. I want to step back to the 1990s real quick.
Okay.
So the NSA hack happened in 2004. We know the Nosferatu are gatherers of information, but I want to go back to the 90s because in the 90s we had what's called the Shadow Curtain that rose in Russia. So this was really interesting. This was a mystical barrier that totally encompassed Russia. And I shouldn't say encompassed, totally encapsulated Russia. So like it was so powerful that if you like say you screwed up in some way and I didn't feel like I needed to kill you, I could send you to Russia, and you couldn't leave.
Yeah,
you could get in.
Banishment.
Yeah. So, and they say as vampires would get close to this shadow curtain, like they would begin bleeding from all their orifices and just, have to retreat. Otherwise they would die. Now, this was created by Baba Yaga, this 4th generation Nosferatu, who was like an arch enemy of Durga Sin, she almost embraced Durga Sin. But we have, we talked about the Niktuku. At some point, one of the Niktuku found Baba Yaga and killed her.
Vasilia.
Oh, okay. And rumor is Durga Sin had a hand in it. And at this point, when Baba Yaga fell, the shadow curtain fell and opened up Russia. And who was the Niktuku you said again?
It was a little boy named
that's creepy as shit.
a 4th generation Cainite, one of the Niktuku progeny of Similard. He was sent by a sire to destroy rebellious Chelder, Baba Yaga. The Niktuku can appear as anything it chooses, but when it bothers to appear at all, it always chooses an innocent-seeming form. A young child was slated for execution by his village for killing his family and several other villagers with tools, poisons, and even leading them into the jaws of lurking predators. And Similard was impressed with the boy's ruthlessness and found him patiently awaiting death, crouching in the corner of a room, watching a spider eat his prey. And so just chose to embrace him. Almost immediately, the boy burst from his cell and fed on the entire village. He did not kill them all. Some he saved, like a spider. Similard was very proud of his boy.
So let's talk about why, what draws Nosferatu to embrace people. So Nosferatu will look for people, like sometimes they embrace out of vengeance. Like if you are a super vain person, or super, like you're just overly attractive and you're very, you actively flaunt it, they may embrace you just to make you ugly.
Yep, out of spite.
Yep. This is one of the reasons why the Toreador hate them so much. Nosferatu will also look for people who tend to be, down on their luck. Or maybe they are that guy who's really good at computers or something else, but just cannot seem to ever get ahead of his or herself. Sorry. So they'll look for people like that. They'll even look for homeless people who are maybe a little bit insane, which strikes me as odd that they'll look for the insane people, but they'll look for the downtrodden.
Well, it's very family oriented. We've seen a lot of the ones that we've talked about so far will bite and abandon, leave them, see if they survive, see if they're strong enough. And here it is very much like you can be a part of whatever group you choose to be a part of, but you're Nosferatu first. Don't forget that. And so trust-wise, it's like, okay, it could be the nicest person, it could be the best friend, they could be good people on the inside,
but
they will sell you out for their family instantly and not think twice about it.
Interestingly, the Nosferatu you talk about how there's those clans that embrace and leave. They'll do that, but it's usually like, again, we go back to that very beautiful person. They'll embrace that beautiful person and just walk away from them. Like, now deal with this.
It's a form of punishment more than...
Yeah, it's that revenge embrace. Socially, like you said, they're very much... Even you mentioned your Nosferatu first. So we did have a split in the clan with the Camarilla and the Sabbat. Yet, however, when those two, like when Nosferatu and Tribute and Nosferatu come together, they're Nosferatu. Yes, we're mortal enemies, but guess what? We may work together.
We have different views, but we're still brothers and sisters.
Yeah. So, like you said, they're very family. They're organized into broods. Typically, we see them living, in sewers or underground cities, which there could be. You don't know how many could be down there. Especially if they're pulling from the homeless and stuff. So there could be a ton of them down there. Now, one of the things that I think is fascinating about the Nosferatu is if you go into a Nosferatu stronghold and you run across a spider, well, more than likely it's going to be larger than most average spiders, because
they've got them. They've they're ghouls. I mean, right?
Yeah.
It's like they've got rats. They've got.
So they have a spawning pit, is what it's called,
Okay.
where they all put blood into it. And it's just this pool of fetid, nasty, or it's a pool of water. That is, I shouldn't say fetid, nasty water, because it's a place where animals would go to drink, like your rats and your spiders and things like that. They come here to quench their thirst. But now it's been tainted by Nosferatu blood. So they become addicted to it. So they're constantly coming back. And which, I mean, that's why we see Nosferatus with animalism. They tend to be masters of animalism and be able to control that.
Another form of spies.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. You never know if that spider on the wall.
Yep. It's going to relay its information back or have somebody else looking through its eyes or. Yeah.
Yep.
At school, I mean, they literally, I mean, they have the definition of being the spy master, and that is what they are. Their talents and their setup is all designed around that.
Obfuscate.
Can't even say it.
I know.
But everything is about being in where they need to be to survive. It's self-preservation.
Yep.
Because not only, I mean, you know, like you were saying, it's easy to hide, but now all of a sudden they're getting persecuted for being lepers at night, or God, you were so ugly, there's something wrong with you, and they were being killed, and so it's just one of those things of they didn't get to hide, so they had to learn how to survive.
Yep. So if you play Nosferatu, one of the things you must remember is your appearance is 0.
Can never be raised, and you always have a -2 in 5th edition.
Which they had to change some of that in 5th edition because Obfuscate relied on appearance.
Okay.
So they did have to make some changes. So in 5th edition, it's let's see, what is it called? In V5, the Nosferatu's Bane changed. Hideous and vile, all Nosferatu count as having the repulsive flaw, which is a -2 flaw, and can never increase their rating in the looks merit. In addition, any attempt to disguise themselves as human incur a penalty to the dice pool equal to the character's Bane severity. This includes, like, if they attempt to make themselves look different with Mask of 1,000 Faces or Manifold Guise. Their compulsion is that the need to know permeates the vampire. This is why they're the spy masters. They become consumed with a hunger for secrets to know that which few or no one knows, almost as strong as their blood, or almost as strong as their desire for blood. They also don't like to share secrets. And you can expect, if you were going to a Nosferatu for secrets, the price is going to be high.
Yeah, it is. And it's almost it's a form of currency. It's going to be, well, I'll tell you something, but I need to know something first. And it has to be good.
Yep. In older editions of the game, you had, what was it? In 1st edition, Obfuscate relied on appearance. And because that was one of their key disciplines, they actually had to change that. So it was kind of a bug fix is what they called it. So in later editions, they took away the appearance reliance of Obfuscate.
Okay.
Which is great. Otherwise, you have a discipline that's no good to you.
Right. You're already at a penalty when it's supposed to be something you're the best at.
So there you go.
Yeah. No, another great time reading a clan that, again, I don't think, oh, what, they're ugly? Yeah, no, I don't do that.
Yeah, this has been a really neat exercise for both of us because even though I knew about the clans, I've never really dug this deep into some of them. Like, I never really liked the Malkavians. I never really liked the Nosferatu. The Nosferatu, I always use them as the bad guys in my campaigns.
Yeah.
And while I can still see that, that should have been the person that the people went to for information.
Go to see him for information. And again, out of all of them, I mean, it is the most, I don't know, they're almost the kindest in the strangest ways. I mean, as far as, they take them in, they take care of the ones that we've thrown away as society. They make sure they have shelter and there's a trade out. But I mean, again, it's not dominate. It's not compulsion. It's not forced. It is compassion, whether that's, a means to an end or whatever, but it is one of those things of, yeah, you look like me.
Right.
You have a home. And that's a crazy thing to see from just
Monsters.
this world. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's one of the only classes that we see that, so some of them hate them, other ones they use them as puppets and playthings, some of them are too crazy to care. And this one here, actually, I mean, it is these humans who are abandoned by society are willing to die for the monsters. and you don't see that. So
Right.
it's pretty cool.
So you have these monsters who they're the most humane of the monsters.
Yeah, they don't advertise it, they don't flash
Right.
it, and I think that's the thing of
And they're the most monstrous of the monsters.
they look the part. Where what they are on the inside is how the other ones look on the outside.
Right.
You know, it's just such a huge role reversal, and I don't think they don't get credit, they don't get talked about. And again, if Mother Teresa didn't say, "Look at how good I am," you know, it's just like you recognize her for her deed. She's not on Instagram posting, "Look at, I just donated $5 to this." You know what I mean? Like, if you do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, and it's weird. I mean, it is a weird thing on them, but I mean, it's important to them. It's another form of information. It's another form of family, and it's crazy. It's cool.
It is. It is. So that is going to be the end of the Nosferatu clan for us. Next up, we will be looking at, if my alphabetizing is correct, because we're looking at the Camarilla clans first. We should be at Toreador.
I think so.
And then we'll have Tremere and Venture after that. Then we're going to branch out to the rest of the 13s that we haven't done.
Cool.
So that is our segment on the Nosferatu. I know there's tons of Nosferatu fans out there that know more about this clan than we do. Feel free to jump in the conversation and tell us, hey, what about this? What about this? We don't mind being, having stuff told to us.
Yeah.
In fact, Nolan, if they wanted to get a hold of you, how could they do it?
I am on Twitter at nlameres, NLAMERES.
And of course, if you want to reach me, you can find me at most social media outlets at 307RPG, except on Facebook, where it is still The Forge Herald. If you want to check out some of the other stuff that Nolan and I do, we both are involved in Actual Play Podcast. Nolan is currently running a homebrew D&D campaign, which you can find on our SoundCloud page by searching 307RPG. Nolan plays in our Vampire the Masquerade game that I'm running, as well as a Scarred Lands game that I'm running.
Yeah. I get to play a La Sombra in Vampire, which is fun and exciting. I'm sure I'm doing it wrong. And then Scarred Lands, I get to play a bard named Vesrin, which has been a blast. I love that class. I love being sarcastic. It's who I am by nature, so I'm not really role-playing. I'm just being a douche.
And as we finish up the Giovanni Chronicles, we will be moving to 5th edition Vampire.
Yeah, and I have, I'm enjoying reading the 5th edition book. I think, again, it's always a fear of, there's a lot of Nosferatu fans. I would be afraid to play one because you don't know if you do it justice or not. And I feel like that's a lot easier to do when it's like a 5th edition thing, because you can blame it on being new, where it's like, I'm a 7th generation La Sombra. Like, I should know what the hell's up. And so it's like, oh my gosh, people are going to hear me play it and hate it.
When you look at like LA by Night, the bar is set pretty high for Nosferatu by Jasper.
Yeah.
So I pity anybody who's going to try to do an actual play or even stream a Nosferatu and have to try to hold up to. That's like, going back to first season of Critical Role. I'm trying to play a barbarian and live up to
not Grog. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not Grog, not Vex. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, again, I think 5th edition does a great job of streamlining it, making it good. They've got some good examples in the book. I've been impressed with the book as far as just documents. I like how it reads. You've talked about Beckett's Jihad Diary, and like when I'm sitting there reading about the class, and all of a sudden I see this outside perspective of the FBI looking at Nosferatu, and it's like, man, they really underestimate these guys. That is like, they know all this stuff because of ShrekNet, and they're still so clueless. Like, it's just such a cool outside perspective. And then if you read about their relationship with the Toreador, and the Toreador are like just happy that, oh, look at you, like you got your hand slapped, like you're no longer important. And like, again, they're underestimating. Man, it's good stuff. It's exciting stuff.
It is good stuff. All right, guys. Well, that is our show for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Bye.